The United Nations Secretary-General has sounded a doomsday climate change warning on his New Zealand visit, but praised this country's aspirations in aiming to be carbon neutral by 2050. Antonio Guterres was quizzed by high school and university students today on how the UN might better twist the arms of world leaders to move to green economies and slow the rapid rise of the Earth's temperature. Alex Perrottet went along with camera operators Dan Cook and Nick Munro to see what answers he could give.
A Pacific welcome for the world's top diplomat, here on a whirlwind trip, but with enough time to engage with students at AUT's South Campus in Monaco. And with so many Pacific people at risk of environmental dangers and the knock-on public health effects, his message was clear.
Climate change is, in my opinion, the defining issue of our time, the biggest threat to our lives and to the life of the planet. And we are not winning the battle against climate change.
In practical terms, Antonio Guterres says there's three major tasks, and it's no secret that many countries are way behind deadline.
It is absolutely essential to move taxation from salaries to carbon. It is absolutely essential to stop the subsidies to fossil fuels. From 2020 onwards, not any more coal power plants to be built, because we need to have a green economy and not a grey economy.
But the UN Secretary-General sounded a disappointed note when confessing that many of his ilk have all but given up.
It is clear my generation is having enormous difficulties in assuming responsibilities in relation to climate change.
He said current leaders have lost the political will, and they won't be around to suffer what he called the catastrophe of a global temperature rise higher than 1.5 degrees by the end of the century. So, Mr. Guterres challenged the youth to act, prompting one student to throw the ball back into his court.
It might be too late to wait for us to get into power before those effects are irreversible. So my question to you would be, what is going to be your role in your tenure as Secretary-General, and what will the United Nations do to help address this issue before it's too late?
I'm not waiting for you to be in power. I'm waiting for you to be as noisy as possible now. And to mobilize societies, your parents, your families, your friends, and to put your governments under pressure. That's what I'm asking you now. And then, when you'll come to power, I hope that things will be much better.
But the noise has been made for years, especially from Pacific Island leaders who have pointed the finger of blame at the big polluters, accusing them of causing their rising sea levels, drought and high water temperatures that bleach coral and kill fish. Mr. Guterres says he's frustrated at the UN Security Council permanent members and their veto power. After all, three of them, the US, China and Russia, are among the largest global CO2 emitters. So another student asked how Mr. Guterres will get those polluters to change their ways.
What does the United Nations have planned for countries that are not fulfilling their commitment or duty to the 2016 Paris Climate Agreement?
Name and shame. We don't have instruments to punish. So, name and shame.
Naming and shaming hasn't exactly worked out for Pacific nations. Even as the Secretary-General was addressing this crowd, Fiji's Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama was speaking in Suva at a climate action conference, saying Pacific Island countries have to look at changing their economies to deal with the impacts rather than wait around for others to stop causing harm. The young, energetic students here at AUT gave the impression that they doubted whether the United Nations was even listening to the youth. Mr. Guterres promised that it would engage more, but he says it's hard to get the adults to adapt to new ways.
We are changing our communication strategy. It was a very old-fashioned communication strategy. When I arrived in the UN, there were 3 colleagues dealing with social media and 60 with radio. So, as you see, we tend to be a rather old-fashioned organization. Now we are completely changing that, but the resistance is big.
Antonio Guterres flies to Christchurch before moving on to Fiji, Vanuatu and Tuvalu. The Foreign Minister Winston Peters will travel with Mr. Guterres tomorrow, ahead of a Pacific Islands Forum leaders meeting in Suva on Wednesday. In Monaco for Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.